The case that shocked Spain began on a hot summer Sunday, August 8, 2004, in the sunny city of Málaga. The day dawned like so many others on the Costa del Sol. Tourists crowded the beaches, families shopped, and the air seemed to vibrate with the energy typical of an Andalusian summer. No one could have imagined that, on that very day, a tragedy would unfold and leave profound marks on the city's history. It was in this setting that little Sofía Ruiz, just 7 years old, mysteriously disappeared inside one of the region's busiest shopping centers, Barrio Centro. In a matter of minutes, the peaceful routine of an ordinary family turned into a nightmare that would last 16 long years. Headlines of the time filled local and national newspapers. Girl disappears in Málaga shopping mall. Desperate family searches for answers. The entire country watched with anguish the relentless search for Sofía. The investigation mobilized the police and the press and the public. But despite their efforts, no concrete trace was found. It was as if the girl had vanished into thin air. Sofía Ruiz's story became a symbol of the pain of families living through the hell of a child's disappearance. With each passing year, hope diminished, but never completely disappeared. The Ruiz family continued to believe that, somewhere, their daughter was still alive. Time passed. The city changed, and the case was shelved, forgotten by many. However, fate still held a twist no one could have predicted. In 2020, in the midst of the digital age, a simple photo posted on Instagram rekindled a mystery that seemed buried by time. One image, one detail, a mark on the neck, and suddenly everything came back to light. What happened to Sofía Ruiz? How did social media solve a case that had defied authorities for over a decade? The answer to these questions is surprising and moving, revealing one of the most impressive reunions ever seen in Spanish criminal history. If you want to find out how this mystery was finally solved, subscribe to the channel now. Sofía Ruiz's story is just beginning, and what comes next is even more impressive. Don't leave, because the next chapter will leave you breathless. Sofía Ruiz was a girl who seemed to carry within her all the light and innocence of childhood. Born in Málaga in 1997, she was the pride and charm of the Ruiz family. Small for her age, just over 5 feet tall and weighing 20 kilos, she had a lively, expressive face, dark brown hair that fell in loose curls to her shoulders, and large, warm brown eyes, full of curiosity and life. Those who knew her said that Sofía always seemed ready to discover something new, to ask questions, to pursue the unknown with the energy of someone who believes the world is a safe place full of wonders. Her most striking feature, however, was a small crescent-shaped birthmark just below her left ear. Her mother called it a sign from God, while her older sister, Carla, joked that it was the moon mark, a detail that, years later, would become a key piece in the outcome of a story that seemed lost. From a very young age, Sofía displayed a cheerful, outgoing, and loving personality. She was one of those children who talked to everyone without fear or shyness. She greeted neighbors, struck up conversations with strangers, and had the rare gift of making friends wherever she went. Her teacher at El Romeral School used to say that Sofía had a soul like sunshine, always ready to light up the room with her smile and inexhaustible energy. In the classroom, she was a curious, participatory, and highly imaginative student. She loved drawing, making up stories, and reciting fairy tales to her classmates. She had a collection of children's books and especially enjoyed stories featuring animals or princesses. When asked what she wanted to be when she grew up, she would answer without hesitation, a veterinarian. She said that animals were her best friends and that she wanted to take care of them when they were sad. Sofía's connection with nature and animals was evident in everything she did. She couldn't pass a pet shop without stopping to admire the baby animals in the display cases, and she dreamed of having a puppy of her own. Her parents, Isabel and Miguel, promised that one day it would happen, but until then, she contented herself with caring for a goldfish she kept in her room. She named it, talked to it, and believed it understood her. At home, Sofía was the center of attention. Isabel, her mother, a dedicated nurse, and Miguel, her father, a hard-working electrician, saw her as a symbol of joy and hope. But it was with Carla, her sister 8 years older, that Sofía shared the deepest bond. Carla had been part of every stage of her sister's growth. She helped change diapers, give her first bath, and teach her first words. The two were inseparable. Sofía followed Carla everywhere, imitating her gestures, her clothes, and even her way of speaking. She loved sitting in her sister's room to watch her study or get ready, even though Carla, now a teenager, sometimes asked for a little space. Their relationship transcended their age difference. Carla was more than a sister. She was a kind of second mother, a confidant, a protector. When Isabel worked long shifts at the hospital, it was Carla who cared for Sofía after school, preparing her snacks, helping with her homework, and reading bedtime stories. This shared experience created a bond between them so strong it seemed unbreakable. Sofía trusted Carla completely, and Carla, despite the distractions typical of adolescence, loved her sister devotedly. Anyone who saw the two together could easily see the bond that united them. Carla, more reserved, became lighthearted and playful around the little girl. Sofía, in turn, found her sister a role model. She liked to wear similar clothes, tie her hair the same way, and call her my best friend. This sisterly relationship would later become one of the most tragic elements of the story, as Sofía's sudden absence would leave Carla with a feeling of guilt that would forever mark her life. In the summer of 2004, when she disappeared, Sofía was living a phase of pure innocence and enthusiasm. She had finished her first year of school, was waiting for the holidays to start, and dreamed of little things: a new Nemo backpack, a trip to the beach, more time with her sister. She was an ordinary child, from an ordinary family, with simple dreams and a huge heart. Nothing in her short life indicated that she would become the center of one of Spain's most mysterious and moving cases, and perhaps that's precisely why her story continues to move us. Because Sofía Ruiz was a girl like so many others, full of life, love, and dreams, whose innocence was abruptly cut short, leaving behind a devastated family and an entire country searching for answers. The Ruiz family was a true reflection of the working-class city of Málaga in the early 2000s. They lived in a modest 3-bedroom apartment in the Carlinda neighborhood, a quiet area filled with small businesses, tree-lined squares, and streets where children played until nightfall. The family's routine was simple, marked by work, school, and moments when love and togetherness overcame everyday difficulties. They were known by their neighbors as a cheerful, close-knit family, always willing to help others. Isabel Ruiz, their mother, was a nurse at the Regional University Hospital of Málaga. Dedicated to her profession, she was known for her patience, empathy, and the gentle smile that could calm even the most distressed patients. Working the morning shift, she organized her schedule so that she was always home when her daughters returned from school. Miguel Ruiz, their father, was a self-employed electrician. The owner of a small business he had built himself with effort and persistence, he served hotels, restaurants, and shops in the Costa del Sol tourist region. He was a practical, reserved man, but deeply affectionate with his daughters, proud of the home he had built and the love he maintained with Isabel after nearly 2 decades of marriage. The Ruiz family's life was modest but happy. On weekends, when Miguel wasn't on emergency calls, the family would stroll along Malagueta Beach or stroll through the city's historic center, enjoying churros con chocolate on Sunday afternoons. Isabel loved photographing these simple moments, creating albums that chronicled the growth of her daughters, Carla and Sofía. Carlinda's apartment was small but full of life. The walls displayed Sofía's drawings, the shelves held Carla's textbooks, and the constant sound of children's laughter made the space a welcoming home. Isabel, with her attentive maternal instinct, was the heart of the house, while Miguel, with his sense of responsibility and calm, was the solid foundation on which everyone rested. The landscape of Málaga in 2004 reflected prosperity and vitality. It was an especially hot summer, with temperatures easily exceeding 35 degrees Celsius. The beaches were packed with tourists from all over Europe. Seaside bars served fried fish and paella, and the newly opened Larios shopping center had become a meeting place for families seeking an air-conditioned retreat from the heat. The city, with its narrow streets and seaside aroma, pulsated with energy. It was a time of economic optimism in Spain, and Málaga, as one of the country's most important tourist destinations, seemed to be experiencing its peak. The Ruiz family enjoyed these summers with simplicity. Isabel planned short outings, trips to the beach, and lunches at her maternal grandmother's house, while Miguel tried to balance his intense workload with family time. Carla, at 15, was already showing maturity and helped with the housework. Sofía, the youngest, at 7 was the center of attention, bringing joy and activity to every day. That summer, as they did every year, the Ruiz had planned their traditional shopping trip before the start of the new school year. It was a family custom, choosing new clothes, buying school supplies, and, if the budget allowed, a toy or book as a reward for good behavior during the previous year. Isabel saw this tradition as a ritual of renewal, a symbolic way to begin the new school year with enthusiasm and hope. On Sunday, August 8, 2004, everything seemed to follow the same pattern as always. Miguel woke up early to respond to an electrical emergency at a hotel in Torremolinos, promising to meet up with his family later. Isabel, Carla, and Sofia had breakfast together, bread with tomato and olive oil, coffee for the older ones, and a cup of hot chocolate for the younger one. Shortly before 11, they left the apartment, excited about the outing. Isabel chose the Larios shopping mall, modern, spacious, and comfortable, as her shopping destination that day. At that moment, nothing indicated that this ordinary morning would mark the beginning of a tragedy that would change their lives forever. The family's white car drove down the sunny streets of Carlinda, while Sofia sang in the back seat, never imagining that this would be the last day their innocent routine would remain intact. Malaga shone in the sun, the sea sparkling in the distance, and the city's buzzing midsummer. It was a perfect portrait of normalcy, family harmony, and everyday life at its most serene. But behind this apparent tranquility, fate was already moving silently, setting the stage for one of the most mysterious and devastating disappearances in recent Spanish history. Sunday, August 8, 2004, dawned warm and sunny in Malaga. It was a typical Andalusian summer day, with a completely blue sky and a heat that was already felt in the early hours of the morning. In the Carlinda neighborhood, the Ruiz family's routine was proceeding with its usual tranquility. Isabel, the mother, had woken early to prepare breakfast. She served toast with olive oil and tomato, coffee with milk for her and Carla, and a cup of chocolate milk for little Sofia, who had been awake since early morning. Excited about the outing they had planned, the house was full of life. The sound of silverware, the smell of fresh coffee, and morning conversations created a familiar atmosphere that exuded the security and harmony of a happy home. The tradition of shopping before the start of the new school year was one of Sofia's most anticipated moments. For her, it wasn't just about buying clothes and school supplies, but a real event. It was the opportunity to choose something special, something that represented the new cycle that was about to begin. That morning, her greatest wish was simple and typical of a 7-year-old. She wanted a new backpack from the movie Finding Nemo, released the previous year and which had become her obsession. Sofia had seen the movie in the theater with her family, and then countless times on video. She knew the lines by heart and sang the songs enthusiastically. Ever since her mother mentioned they were going to the mall, she'd been talking about nothing else. She said she wanted a backpack with Nemo's face on the front and that, if her mother would let her, she would also buy a matching lunchbox. Isabel smiled at her daughter's enthusiasm. Sofia's innocence and joy were a balm amidst the exhausting hospital routine, and moments like that were precious to her. Meanwhile, Miguel, the father, had already left early for work. He'd received an emergency call from a hotel in Torremolinos, where the electrical system had failed during the early hours. He promised he'd try to finish work before noon so he could meet his family at the mall, even though everyone knew his commitments rarely ended on time. Isabel, accustomed to this routine, didn't mind. She knew he did his best to be there. Around 11 o'clock, Isabel called her daughters to get ready. Carla, 15, wore jeans and a pink t-shirt, her hair loose and her cell phone always at hand. Sofia wore a white dress embroidered with small yellow flowers, white sandals, and her inseparable colorful scrunchie holding back her brown curls. Before leaving, Isabel went through her bag, checking the shopping list. School uniforms, shoes, stationery, and, if there was time, a toy for Sofia. Shortly after the three of them walked down to the building's parking lot and got into the family's white Seat Ibiza, a simple but reliable car. The drive to Larios shopping center took about 20 minutes. The streets were quiet, traffic light for a summer Sunday. Sofia sang in the back seat, alternating between children's songs and lines from the movie Finding Nemo. Carla, in the front seat, texted her friends, telling them she was spending the day at the mall. Isabel, at the wheel, glanced in the rearview mirror and smiled, proud of the family she had built. Upon arriving at the mall, Isabel had to drive around a few times to find a spot in the underground parking lot. When she finally parked, she turned to her daughters and issued the warning every mother repeats in busy places. She lowered her voice and looked firmly at Sofia. "Listen carefully, my love. Always stay close to me, don't stray. And if we ever get lost, look for a security guard or a mall employee. And never, under any circumstances, talk to strangers. Okay?" Sofia nodded seriously. repeating the instructions as if memorizing a mantra. "I don't talk to strangers, I always stay close to you." Isabel smiled, smoothed her hair, and asked Carla to help take care of her sister. "You know how she is. She gets distracted easily." Carla responded distractedly, checking her cell phone, but assured her she would stay alert. The three of them got out of the car and walked through the parking lot toward the elevator that led to the main entrance. Isabel held their bags. Carla held her sister's hand, and Sofía, excited, was already talking about the toy store and the Nemo backpack she intended to buy. When the mall's automatic doors opened, a blast of air conditioning enveloped them, relieving the heat outside. The ambient sound of voices, laughter, and commercial music filled the space. It was just another ordinary Sunday in Málaga, and nothing suggested that this would be the day that would forever change the Ruiz family's destiny. Everything seemed normal, mundane, even banal, but sometimes, it's precisely in the midst of apparent normalcy that fate decides to turn into tragedy. The clock was just after 2 in the afternoon, when Isabel Ruiz decided it was time for a lunch break. After nearly 3 hours of browsing stores, buying clothes, shoes, and school supplies, she, Carla, and little Sofía were tired. They had accomplished most of their list, and now all that was left was to enjoy a moment of rest before continuing their tour. They took the escalator to the second floor of the Larios shopping center, where the food court was located. The place was full of families, like them, seeking a brief respite from the intense heat of the Málaga summer. The tables were almost all occupied, and the sound of the place was a mix of voices, clanging trays, background music, and occasional announcements over the loudspeakers. Sofía, excited, was the first to decide what she wanted to eat. Like any 7-year-old, I had a clear preference: a McDonald's Happy Meal. Isabel smiled at her daughter's excitement and agreed. They got in line, waited about 15 minutes, and ordered 2 Happy Meals, one with a burger, the other with nuggets, for Sofía, a Big Mac for Carla, and a salad for Isabel, who was trying to balance her diet even on busy days. Finding a free table was a challenge. It was busy, families came and went, and children ran between tables. After a few minutes of searching, they managed to find a table near the window, overlooking the parking lot and part of the street. Isabel placed the shopping bags next to her. Carla took out her cell phone, and Sofía, impatient, ripped open the packaging of the toy that came with the snack. During lunch, Sofía talked nonstop. She told stories about school, talked about her friends, reminisced about cartoons, and insisted on asking if they could visit the Toy Planet store after lunch. Isabel said yes, as long as she behaved. The girl smiled broadly and promised. Carla, on the other hand, was oblivious to the conversation. She divided her attention between her snack and her cell phone, exchanging messages with a friend named Patricia, a classmate she hadn't seen since the start of the summer. Isabel discreetly reprimanded her, asking her to put her phone away and pay attention to her sister, but Carla only responded with a distracted wave. When they finished eating, Isabel got up to clear the trays and, upon returning to the table, realized she needed to go to the bathroom. The women's restroom was on the other side of the food court, visible about 30 meters away. Before leaving, she looked at Carla and gave a clear, firm, almost instinctive warning. "Keep an eye on your sister. Don't leave the table. I'll be back in 5 minutes," Carla replied without looking up from her cell phone. "Okay, Mom. You can go." Isabel bent down to Sofía's level and repeated, "You stay here with your sister, okay? Don't go anywhere." The girl nodded seriously, though her eyes already showed impatience. Isabel headed to the bathroom and disappeared into the crowd. At the table, Carla returned to typing, immersed in her conversation with Patricia. A few minutes later, she heard her name being called. She looked up to see Patricia herself coming toward her, accompanied by her parents and younger brother. Her friend smiled, surprised and happy to see her. The two hugged and began chatting animatedly about their vacation, the places they had visited, and their mutual friends. The unexpected reunion turned into a whirlwind of laughter and memories. Sofía, sitting nearby, was ignored by the two teenagers who exchanged quick confidences and talked about topics that had nothing to do with her. The girl, who had been playing with her Happy Meal toy until then, began to get bored. She looked around, observing the people, the lights, and the constant movement of the food court. She tried to get her sister's attention, but Carla was completely absorbed in her conversation with Patricia. It was then that the memory of her mother's promise came to her. After lunch, They could go to the Toy Planet store. Sofía thought that if she went there alone, just to take a look, no one would mind. She knew where the store was. They had passed it earlier and was convinced it wouldn't take long. Without saying a word, the girl slipped off her chair, adjusted her backpack strap, and began walking toward the escalator. The mall security cameras captured the exact moment. It was 2:12 p.m. In the footage, Sofía appears walking purposefully, wearing a white dress decorated with small yellow flowers, and her illuminated sandals flashing with each step. No one seems to notice the small figure descending the escalator alone amidst the flow of people. At 2:14 p.m., she enters Toy Planet, the large toy store on the ground floor, and disappears among the colorful shelves. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Isabel washed her hands in the bathroom and Carla remained distracted, laughing at Patricia's stories. Sofía's chair remained empty, the shopping bags piled beside it, the McDonald's toy forgotten on the table. It was only a few minutes, enough time for normality to turn into tragedy. What seemed like a brief adventure to a child would become the beginning of one of the most mysterious and heartbreaking disappearances in recent Spanish history. Security camera footage from Larios shopping center accurately recorded what would become the most analyzed and debated timeline of the entire investigation. At 2:12 p.m., the lenses installed above the central escalator captured a seemingly ordinary scene. A small girl, wearing a white dress with yellow flowers, descending alone amidst the flow of customers. It was Sofía Ruiz. The footage shows the child tightly holding the rubber handrail as the metal steps lead her to the ground floor. There was no fear or hesitation in her movements, only the curiosity and confidence typical of someone who believes they are safe. Several people appear in the same footage, some ascending, others descending, but no one seems to notice the girl's solitary presence. To everyone, she was just another distracted child on an ordinary Sunday. At 2:14 p.m., another camera, positioned at the entrance to the Toy Planet store, confirms the sequence. Sofía appears in view, walking determinedly toward the automatic doors. The store's colorful sign and toy-filled interior create a vibrant contrast to the tragedy that was about to unfold. As soon as she crosses the threshold, the girl stops for a moment, surveys the shelves, and then heads directly to the doll section on the left. In the footage, she can be seen smiling, touching the packaging, and examining a Barbie in a pink dress. A store employee, later identified as Javier Molina, approaches and exchanges a few words with her. The conversation lasts less than 20 seconds. After that, he walks away and continues his work, unaware that he has just spoken to the protagonist of a disappearance that would mark the country. Between 2:15 p.m. and 2:22 p.m., Toy Planet's internal cameras show Sofía calmly walking through the aisles. In one image, she crouches down to examine a lower shelf. In another, she walks between the displays, her shoes flashing with each step. There are no signs of panic, chasing, or any unusual behavior. Everything seems completely routine. However, at 2:23 p.m. and a few seconds, something changes. The recording shows the girl turning her head to the right, as if something has caught her attention. She takes a few steps toward the back of the store, where the camera's view is interrupted by a row of tall shelves. And then, she simply disappears from the recording field. The camera covering the main entrance continues recording normally, but Sofía never reappears. The following images show only customers coming and going, families with bags, children with toys in their hands, couples talking. None of them are Sofía Ruiz. The minutes pass and the recording clock reads 2:24 p.m., then 2:30 p.m., and the girl never returns. That brief 9-minute interval would be enough to change the fate of an entire family. Meanwhile, on the second floor, Isabel Ruiz finished washing her hands in the bathroom. She quickly checked herself in the mirror and headed toward the table where she'd left her daughters. At 2:17 p.m., she appears on another camera, calmly crossing the food court, clutching her purse. However, as she approaches, she notices something different. The chair where Sofía was sitting is empty. The McDonald's toy remains on the table, but the girl is gone. Carla chats animatedly with her friend Patricia, unaware of the look of alarm beginning to form on her mother's face. "Carla, where's your sister?" Isabel asks, her voice already tense. The teenager, surprised, looks around, searching. Her initial confusion quickly turns to despair. "She was here. Mom, she was just here." Isabel feels her heart race. She looks around, turns, tries to locate the girl among the tables, and in seconds, Her calm gives way to panic. She screams her daughter's name once, twice, 3 times with no response. With each failed attempt, her voice becomes louder, more shaky. People around her begin to notice her desperation and look in her direction. By this point, little Sofía had completely disappeared from view. The Toy Planet store, the parking lot, and the mall hallways would be replayed frame by frame hundreds of times, but no footage would show the girl leaving the store. She had simply vanished into a space surrounded by cameras and witnesses, as if swallowed by thin air. The moment Isabel realizes her daughter's absence marks the end of normalcy. What until then had been an ordinary Sunday turns into a desperate race against time. Her mother begins frantically searching the hallways, while Carla, crying, tries to explain what happened. No one could have imagined, at that moment, that those few seconds of footage would become the only concrete record of Sofía Ruiz, before she disappeared without a trace. Panic gripped Lario's shopping center in a matter of minutes. As soon as Isabel Ruiz realized her daughter was nowhere to be found in the food court, her serenity gave way to despair. Her first reaction was to run around the area, calling Sofía's name loudly, asking everyone she crossed paths if they'd seen a little girl in a white dress with yellow flowers. Carla, pale and trembling, followed her weeping mother, repeating between sobs that her sister had just been there, that she'd only been distracted for a few minutes. The clock read just after 2:25 p.m. when Isabel, unsuccessful in her search of the aisles, decided to run to the mall's safety. In the control room, the head of security, Antonio Fernandez, an experienced man with over 15 years of experience working there, immediately recognized the gravity of the situation. As soon as Isabel entered, distraught, explaining that her 7-year-old daughter had disappeared, he immediately activated the emergency protocol for missing minors, a series of procedures designed to deal with such situations. The first step was to radio all security personnel and immediately block all exits to the shopping center. Within seconds, the main and side doors were under increased surveillance, while guards were stationed at the access ramps and in the parking lots. No vehicle could leave without being checked, and no child could pass unaccompanied. At the same time, Antonio grabbed the PA microphone and made the first search announcement. His voice echoed through the hallways and stores, interrupting the usual Sunday hubbub. Attention, attention. We're looking for a 7-year-old girl named Sofía Ruiz, wearing a white dress with yellow flowers and a colorful backpack. If anyone has seen her or has any information, please report immediately to the security center. The announcement was repeated every 2 minutes, in both Spanish and English. Customers began to look around with concern. Store employees left their counters to help with the search, and parents with their children clutched them tighter, fearing the worst. Meanwhile, Antonio and another security guard, Fernando Lopez, turned their attention to the security cameras. They quickly reviewed the food court footage and, within minutes, located the crucial image. At 2:12 p.m., Sofía appears descending the escalators alone. From there, they followed her path through the various cameras on the ground floor until the entrance to the Toy Planet store at 2:14 p.m. Isabel, who was watching everything with trembling hands, felt a brief sense of relief. After all, they knew where she had last been, but this relief vanished almost instantly when Fernando fast-forwarded the video and realized that, starting at 2:23 p.m., the girl simply stopped appearing in the footage. No camera recorded her leaving the store. 2 security guards were immediately dispatched to Toy Planet. They arrived a few minutes later, spoke with employees, and conducted a thorough sweep of the store. Nothing. Sofía was missing. The manager confirmed that she had seen a girl with the same features playing in the doll section, but that she had disappeared from view and didn't remember seeing her leave. The guards searched the stockrooms, aisles, dressing rooms, and even the storage room, but to no avail. It was at this point that Antonio, realizing the situation was getting out of hand, ordered the police called. The call was made at 2:45 p.m., and less than 10 minutes later, 2 National Police patrol cars arrived at the scene. Inspector Manuel Cortez, a veteran of the Judicial Police Brigade, took command of the operation. His expression was grave. Upon being briefed on the details and watching the security camera footage, he immediately understood that the disappearance had troubling characteristics. A small girl, last seen alone inside a store, had disappeared with no record of leaving and no direct witnesses. The first measure was to transform the entire shopping center into a controlled search area. All exits were officially closed. Customers were instructed to remain inside until further notice, and a thorough sweep began. More than 30 agents arrived as reinforcements. Teams were formed to search store by store, bathroom by bathroom, and warehouse by warehouse. Sniffer dogs from the canine unit were called in to search for traces of the girl. Security teams and mall employees worked side by side, examining every corner of the building. The atmosphere was one of absolute tension. The constant blare of loudspeakers calling Sofia's name mixed with the sound of hurried footsteps and commanding voices. The shopping center, once bustling with life, now seemed like a scene of controlled chaos. Around 5 p.m. after nearly 2 hours of intense searching, the situation became increasingly desperate. No sign of the girl had been found. External cameras, reviewed in real time, showed nothing conclusive. Authorities began to consider a kidnapping. Outside Mars, the first press vehicles were already approaching. Local journalists, alerted by radio messages and phone calls, began reporting the case live. Within hours, the news spread throughout Spain. That night, major broadcasters opened their newscasts with the same headline: Mysterious Disappearance in Málaga. The smiling face of Sofía Ruiz, taken from photographs provided by her family, graced screens across the country. Soon, the case would become a national commotion, a symbol of the vulnerability of childhood and the fear that every family shares. The search for Sofía had just begun, and Spain, unbeknownst to it, was witnessing the beginning of one of the most harrowing and unforgettable cases in its recent history. The investigation into Sofía Ruiz's disappearance began immediately and intensely. In the first 48 hours, the national police focused all available resources on trying to understand what had happened inside the Larios shopping center. Inspector Manuel Cortés, a veteran officer accustomed to handling kidnapping and disappearance cases, took over coordinating the operation. The first step was to meticulously review all of the mall's security cameras. Over 100 hours of footage were analyzed frame by frame. The images clearly showed Sofia's path from the food court to her entry into the Toy Planet store at 2:14 p.m. The last time she appeared in the recordings was at 2:23 p.m., when she headed to the back of the store and disappeared behind a row of shelves. No cameras recorded her exit, either through the main entrance or the service doors. This fact would become the biggest mystery of the case. Investigators visited every store, restaurant, and branch of the shopping center. They questioned every employee on duty that Sunday, from salespeople to security guards and cleaners. Over 200 statements were collected in the first 72 hours. None of them yielded any concrete answers. Witnesses confirmed that the mall was busy, but no one recalled seeing a girl alone accompanied by a suspicious adult. The Toy Planet store was temporarily closed and turned into an investigation site. Experts scrutinized every corner for fingerprints, hairs, or any trace that might indicate what happened in the minutes following Sofia's last image. Nothing relevant was found. The kidnapping hypothesis began to gain traction as other possibilities were exhausted. Inspector Cortés believed that Sofía could have been taken through a side exit, perhaps through the service corridor connecting the store to a loading area. A faulty camera in that area prevented the moment from being recorded, opening the door to all sorts of speculation. Police focused their efforts on identifying all vehicles that had left the parking lot between 2:20 and 3:00 p.m. License plates, drivers, and passengers were analyzed. Hundreds of people were located and questioned. No solid evidence emerged. As the days passed, the investigation expanded beyond Málaga. Police activated a national missing child alert, and Sofia's photograph was distributed throughout Spain. Interpol and Europol were called in, expanding the search to other countries. Records at ports, airports, and borders were checked. International agents began cross-referencing information with similar cases in Portugal, France, and Morocco. The darkest line of investigation pointed to international child trafficking, a criminal network operating in Europe and North Africa, specializing in illegal adoptions and the exploitation of minors. Although this theory seemed plausible, no concrete evidence was obtained. Every lead that emerged ended in dead ends. The lack of answers began to erode the investigators' spirits and devastate the Ruiz family. Isabel and Miguel were questioned repeatedly, not out of direct suspicion, but out of protocol. The authorities needed to rule out any insider involvement. The family home was searched, their phones monitored, and their finances examined. Nothing indicated any wrongdoing. Isabel, completely shaken, took time off work and began living for the searches. She participated in interviews, television programs, and public campaigns, trying to keep her daughter's image alive. Miguel, more reserved, retreated into a painful silence, working the minimum necessary to support the family. With each new clue, hope was renewed. only to be dashed shortly after. There were countless false reports and sightings. A woman in Seville claimed to have seen a similar girl in a park. A man in Valencia claimed to have information about a group involved in child trafficking. None of these reports were confirmed. The press, which initially covered the case intensely, gradually began to treat it as an unsolved mystery. Over time, the investigation reached a stalemate. Resources dwindled, teams were reassigned, and the case was eventually shelved, classified as a cold case. But for the Ruiz family, Sofia's disappearance was never just a police investigation. It was an open wound that bled daily. Isabel sank into depression, unable to accept silence as an answer. Miguel continued searching, visiting the police station frequently, insisting they reopen the case. Carla, the older sister, carried the brunt of the guilt. It took just 10 minutes of distraction for her life to change forever. Years passed, but time did not erase the pain. Sofia's room remained intact like a shrine. Her dolls, drawings, and the school backpack she never used were still there, silent witnesses to an absence that seemed eternal. For the police, the case had gone cold. For the Ruiz family, it remained alive, fueled by the only thing that remained: the hope that somewhere, Sofía was still alive and would one day return home. The disappearance of Sofía Ruiz irreversibly marked the Ruiz family's life. After the initial months of intense searching, interviews with the police, and appearances in the press, silence began to set in. The lack of answers transformed hope into anguish, and pain became part of their daily routine. Isabel Ruiz, once a strong and dedicated woman, began to sink into a state of profound sadness. The energy she had previously dedicated to her nursing career was consumed by her obsession with finding her daughter. At first, she tried to return to work, but concentration became impossible. Memories of Sofía haunted her in every hospital corridor. Every child she cared for seemed to trigger the same thought: what if it were mine? As the months passed, Isabel took medical leave, and shortly after, decided to take early retirement. Diagnosed with severe depression and an anxiety disorder, she became a recluse, torn between guilt, despair, and a fragile hope that never completely disappeared. Miguel Ruiz reacted differently, but equally painfully. He tried to maintain a veneer of strength. Convinced he needed to provide for the home and care for Isabel and Carla, he continued working as an electrician, but the cheerful, communicative man he once was disappeared. He became silent, distracted, and distant. The work that once brought him pride became merely a mechanical obligation. Many of his clients noticed the change. Delays, forgetfulness, and constant abandonment became frequent. At home, Miguel avoided talking about the matter, but the silence consumed him. He would spend hours sitting on the porch, staring into space, chain-smoking cigarettes while his mind wandered between memories and regrets. She blamed herself for not being at the mall that day, for having gone to work, for not having protected her daughter. Carla, the eldest daughter, faced the trauma differently. She was only 15 when Sofía disappeared, and the guilt haunted her throughout her adolescence. For years, she believed she was responsible for what happened, mentally telling herself that she only had to pay attention for a few more minutes to prevent the tragedy. The pain, however, ultimately shaped her future. After graduating high school, she chose to study social work, determined to transform her suffering into purpose. The decision wasn't easy. Hearing stories of other families devastated by similar losses forced her to relive her own past every day. Still, she persisted. She graduated with honors and went on to work for an organization that offered psychological and legal support to families of the missing. She became an active figure in public campaigns, using her own story as an example of resilience. While Isabel locked herself away at home and Miguel struggled to maintain the family structure, Carla was the link that kept Sofía's name alive in society. She organized annual vigils, participated in radio and television programs, and maintained contact with international associations searching for missing children. She was the voice her mother could no longer use. Over time, she became a kind of bridge between the family's past and present, a symbol that there was still something to fight for. The Ruiz house, however, remained frozen in time. Sofía's room was never altered. Isabel wouldn't allow anyone to touch anything, as if preserving the space was a way to keep her daughter's memory alive. The room became a silent sanctuary, a space of devotion and longing. The wall still displayed the colorful drawings Sofía had made during her last school year. The shelves held her dolls, carefully aligned, and on the bed remained the blanket printed with Disney princesses. On the nightstand, A book of fairy tales remained open to the same page where the girl had left it. Time seemed to stand still in that space, even though the rest of the house already bore the marks of 16 years of pain. For Isabel, entering that room was a sacred ritual. He did it every day, slowly opening the door, sitting on the bed, and talking to his daughter as if she were still there. I told him about the day, the news, the memories. It was a way of maintaining the bond, of refusing to accept the emptiness. Miguel avoided the room, unable to bear the sight of the toys and folded clothes that would never be used. Carla, on the other hand, visited him sometimes, silently, just to smell the past and reaffirm the promise to continue seeking the truth. For 16 years, the Ruiz family's life was about survival. Each of Sofia's birthdays was a cruel reminder of the passage of time. Each Christmas, a table with an empty seat, friends drifted away, neighbors stopped visiting, and the house became a haven of memories. But despite the pain, something remained unshakable: hope. As unlikely as it seemed, Isabel, Miguel, and Carla continued to believe that, somewhere, Sofía was still alive. And this belief, sustained by love and the need to not forget, was what kept them going through 16 years of silence, waiting for a miracle that seemed impossible. 16 years had passed since Sofía Ruiz's disappearance when the world plunged into a different kind of silence. It was 2020, and the COVID-19 pandemic had transformed everyone's lives. The streets of Málaga, once teeming with tourists and sounds, were empty, businesses closed, and people isolated in their homes. For Carla Ruiz, now 31, confinement represented more than a health measure. It was a forced return to the loneliness that had plagued her since childhood. She worked from home, providing psychological and social support to families living the same nightmare her own had faced. Yet, in the long hours of silence, the past returned with force. Sofía's absence, even after so many years, remained like an open wound, a constant presence in her mind and heart. One April afternoon, while absent-mindedly scrolling through Instagram, trying to alleviate the monotony of quarantine, Carla had one of those life-changing moments. She scrolled mindlessly, passing photos of friends, news about the virus, and posts from organizations dedicated to missing persons, pages she'd been following since she started working in the field. Then something stopped her. A seemingly ordinary image, a smiling young woman, in profile, on a sunny beach, the blue sea, her wavy brown hair blowing in the wind, her face partially illuminated by the sun. But what made Carla's heart race wasn't the landscape, nor the smile. It was the detail on her neck, a small, crescent-shaped birthmark just below her left ear. Carla stood motionless in front of the screen. Her blood ran cold, as if time had stopped. That mark, identical to her sister's, was impossible to ignore. For a moment, she thought she was imagining things, that it was merely a reflection of the desire that had never left her. But the longer I looked, the more impossible it became to deny what I saw. The features were familiar, the line of the jaw, the shape of the nose, the serene gaze. It was like seeing an adult version of the girl who disappeared in 2004. The caption simply read, "A perfect day by the sea." The profile name was Aluna, Costa 23, with the location marked in Barcelona. Carla's heart was pounding. She went to the young woman's profile and began examining each image. There were about 30 posts, photos taken in cafes, walks around the city, meetings with friends, smiling selfies. In all of them, the resemblance was unsettling. In one of the images, the young woman appeared head-on, laughing, and Carla could see the small gap between her front teeth, the same detail Sofía had as a child, which Isabel affectionately called her star smile. In another photo, her brown hair fell in loose curls, exactly like Sofía's. Carla brought her hands to her face, trying to hold back the tears. Her immediate impulse was to deny it, to push the idea away, to tell herself it was a coincidence, but something inside her screamed that it wasn't. "It's her," she murmured, almost voiceless. The memory of her sister at 7 came back vividly: the white dress with yellow flowers, her infectious laugh, her curious way of looking at the world. Now, that image blended with the face of a 23-year-old girl, confident and serene, living the life Sofía never had the chance to choose. For the next few minutes, Carla barely breathed. She closed and reopened the app repeatedly, looking at the photos, zooming in on the details, mentally comparing them to her childhood memories. Her feeling was one of conflicting disbelief and hope. Finally, she summoned the courage to send a direct message to the profile. Her hands trembled as she typed, "Hi, I'm sorry if this seems strange, but I think we might have a connection. Have you always lived in Barcelona? The message was sent at 6:42 p.m. After that, time seemed to drag. For the next few hours, Carla couldn't do anything else. She paced the apartment, mentally repeating the same phrase. If it's her, what will I say? And if it's not? At 9:55 p.m., her phone vibrated. It was an Instagram notification. A reply from Luna Costa 23. The young woman had written, "Hi, calling how? Do you know me?" Carla felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. She didn't know whether to cry, laugh, or faint. Every cell in her body told her that this message was from her lost sister, the same sister she had searched for 16 years. The girl who disappeared without a trace on a sunny Sunday in August 2004. From that moment on, Carla Ruiz's life would change forever. Amid the global lockdown, when the world seemed paralyzed, a simple photo on social media resurrected the case that had lain dormant for over a decade. And, for the first time since the day Sofía disappeared, Carla felt the silence finally begin to break. When Carla received the first response from Luna Costa 23, a mixture of fear, hope, and disbelief overcame her. The young woman, polite and curious, answered the questions naturally. She said her name was Luna Costa, that she was 23 years old and lived in Barcelona. She explained that she had been adopted as a child and that she had no clear memories of her childhood before the age of 8. According to her adoptive parents, her biological parents had died in a car accident, and she had been placed in the care of a private adoption agency. The story seemed coherent, but something about the way Luna described her memory gaps made Carla even more uneasy. This wasn't just a coincidence. It was the missing link. Over the next few days, Carla kept in touch with Luna, trying not to scare her. They talked about their childhoods, customs, and their love of books and movies. The more they talked, the more Carla noticed striking similarities. Luna loved animals, was afraid of the dark, and collected antique dolls, something she claimed not to understand, but which always brought her comfort. In one of their conversations, Carla asked permission to share an old family photo, explaining that it reminded her so much of someone dear. She sent a picture of Sofía at 7, smiling in a white dress with curly hair. Luna's response came quickly. "My God, that girl looked so much like me when she was little." That was enough. Carla contacted the Málaga National Police and reported everything she had discovered. The authorities, aware of the case's history, treated the report seriously. In coordination with the Barcelona police, they located Luna and invited her to voluntarily appear for clarification. The young woman was confused and frightened, but agreed. On May 3, 2020, Luna Costa walked into a Barcelona police station, never imagining that that would be the day she would discover the full truth about her life. The agents showed her a folder with photos, newspaper clippings, and old reports. They explained that a girl named Sofía Ruiz had disappeared in Málaga in 2004, and that a woman believed she was her sister. Luna laughed nervously, saying there must be a mistake. But when they showed her the images of the girl in the white dress, her expression changed. She touched the photos carefully, as if trying to awaken something dormant in her memory. She agreed to take a DNA test. The genetic material was collected and sent for analysis. The results arrived 2 weeks later. The match was 99.9%. Luna Costa and Sofía Ruiz were the same person. The revelation shook Spain. After 16 years of mystery, the disappearance of the Malaga girl was finally solved. The press returned to the case with intensity. Television channels broadcast the reunion between mother and daughter, a moment of absolute emotion. Isabel Ruiz, now aged and frail, embraced the young woman and cried uncontrollably, repeating the same words, my girl, you're back." Miguel, her father, remained silent, touching his daughter's face as if needing confirmation that she was real. Carla, beside her, sobbed, begging forgiveness for not having protected her. Luna, or Sofía, wept without fully understanding what she was feeling. The reunion, though magical, was also confusing. The ensuing investigation revealed the scale of the crime. Sofía had been kidnapped by an intermediary, working for an illegal adoption network operating between 2004 and 2010. This organization captured young children, forged documents, and sold them to families who, while claiming to want to adopt, preferred to avoid official bureaucratic procedures. Authorities discovered records of at least 20 similar cases in different regions of Spain. In some, the children had been taken out of the country. In others, Official records showed false deaths or completely reconstructed identities. Luna's adoptive parents, the Costas, were questioned. They stated that they had paid an administrative fee to the agency that arranged the adoption and that they believed they were acting within the law. When confronted with the evidence of forgery, they were in shock. They admitted that over the years, they began to suspect something was wrong, but they never imagined their daughter could have been kidnapped. The court acknowledged that, although they had benefited from the crime, they were also victims of a sophisticated fraud. The arrests took place across Spain. 7 people were convicted, including doctors, social workers, and administrative staff who manipulated hospital records and birth certificates. The sentences ranged from 15 to 25 years in prison. The scandal sparked a wave of national outrage and led the Spanish government to overhaul the entire adoption system. Stricter laws were introduced, requiring mandatory genetic testing for all adoptions and full traceability of the processes. For the Ruiz family, the discovery brought indescribable relief, but also a new form of pain. Sofía was alive, but she had grown up with a different identity, a different family, and a different story. The missing girl returned as a grown woman, with fragmented memories and a life built on a lie. The truth, though liberating, showed that time and innocence could not be recovered. Still, Isabel, Miguel, and Carla knew that, after so many years of darkness, light had finally returned to shine on Sofía Ruiz's name. The reunion between Sofía Ruiz and her biological family was one of the most moving moments in recent Spanish history. After 16 years of pain, silence, and hope, Isabel Ruiz was finally able to embrace the daughter she believed she had lost forever. The meeting took place in a private room at the Málaga National Police Headquarters in May 2020. Isabel trembled when she saw the young woman enter. Before her stood a grown woman with wavy brown hair and large and expressive eyes, identical to her own. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. Neither of them spoke. Isabel simply held out her hands, and when Sofía approached, she hugged her tightly, sobbing uncontrollably. My girl, I've looked for you every day," she repeated through her tears. Sofía, confused, returned the hug, unsure how to react to the intensity of that moment. It was like being enveloped by an emotion that her body recognized but her mind still couldn't understand. Miguel Ruiz remained a few steps behind, motionless, watching the scene with teary eyes. When he finally approached, he gently touched his daughter's face, as if afraid she would disappear again. "You've grown so much," he whispered, his voice breaking. Sofía looked at him with a mixture of tenderness and discomfort. There was an invisible bond there, but it seemed fragile, distant, like a faded memory. Carla, who had been anxiously awaiting this moment since she was 15, couldn't hold back her tears. She hugged her sister tightly, repeating, forgive me," over and over. Sofía, trying to comprehend that flood of feelings, simply replied, "It's not your fault." In the following days, the young girl was taken to her biological parents' home in Málaga. Isabel had prepared everything as if Sofía were still the 7-year-old girl who had disappeared. The room remained untouched, with the dolls, the drawings, and the princess blanket. When Sofía entered and saw the preserved space, she remained silent for long minutes. She touched the objects, opened the drawers, ran her fingers through the children's books, and began to cry. She remembered nothing, but she felt something inexplicable, a silent familiarity, as if that space had stored a part of her that had been forgotten. However, the adjustment wasn't easy. Sofía had grown up as Luna Costa, with a different family, a different story, and a different identity. Her adoptive parents, though devastated by the truth, continued to love her as their own daughter. And Sofía loved them too. She couldn't simply erase 16 years of their relationship. Thus, a delicate process of reintegration began, mediated by psychologists and social workers. Therapy became essential for everyone to deal with the emotional complexity of the situation. Sofía needed to understand that she wasn't to blame for anything that had happened, but she also needed to reconcile the two parts of her existence, the lost girl and the woman she had become. For months, she alternated between Málaga and Barcelona, spending some days with the Ruiz and others with the Costas. The two families, though united by their love for the same person, carried opposing emotions. Isabel and Miguel struggled with the desire to make up for lost time, while the Costas struggled to accept that their daughter now belonged elsewhere as well. Therapy sessions helped establish boundaries and foster a healthy coexistence. Sofía found herself torn between two realities. On one side, the biological parents who gave her life. On the other, the parents who raised her and taught her how to live. Over time, she began to rediscover herself. She discovered small, fragmented memories. The sound of her mother's voice singing, the smell of the house, the image of a teenage sister who read stories to her. These memories came to her gradually, like flashes. In an interview months later, Sofía said the feeling was like remembering a distant dream, which suddenly becomes real. Despite the difficulties, she built a close relationship with Carla. The two began seeing each other frequently, sharing confidences, as if trying to recapture an intimacy that had been broken by time. The process of emotional reconstruction was long and painful. Sofía faced identity crises, fear, and confusion. At times, she wanted to distance herself from it all, unable to handle the public pressure and the weight of being the center of a story that had moved an entire country. At other times, she felt a deep urge to learn more about her origins. It was during this period that she decided to unite the two parts of her life, officially adopting the name Sofía Luna Ruiz. The gesture symbolized reconciliation. Sofía is who I was. Luna is who I became. Now I am both, he declared. Gradually, the young woman found balance. She began working on social projects focused on missing children, inspired by her sister Carla's journey. Although she never fully recovered her childhood memories, she found peace in understanding that her story, however tragic, had generated transformation and hope. For Isabel and Miguel, seeing her smile again was a true miracle. And for Sofía Luna Ruiz, rediscovering her origins meant, above all, rediscovering herself. The case of Sofía Ruiz, which for 16 years kept Spain suspended between hope and mourning, became much more than a family tragedy. It became a social, legal, and human landmark. The revelation that the girl, who disappeared in 2004, had been kidnapped and inserted into a network of illegal adoptions sparked a wave of collective indignation that transcended the borders of the city of Málaga and reached the entire country. For the first time, public opinion was confronted with the complexity of a system that had failed to protect the most vulnerable, and of a state that, unwittingly, had allowed enough loopholes for crime to flourish under the guise of legality. The impact of the case prompted a profound review of adoption and child safety policies in Spain. The government introduced new regulations mandating genetic verification in all adoption processes, eliminating the possibility of document forgery. Intermediary agencies were subjected to strict controls, and the national registration system began automatically cross-referencing data between hospitals, civil registries, and child protection agencies. Furthermore, Sofía's disappearance led to the creation of unified emergency protocols for missing children, integrating police forces, private companies, and shopping centers into a single early warning system. Now, when a child goes missing, the entire country is notified within minutes. These measures were only part of the changes the case brought about. At a social level, Sofía's story sparked a new collective awareness of the value of community vigilance and empathy. Ordinary citizens, previously accustomed to seeing disappearances as mere newspaper headlines, began engaging in campaigns, sharing information, and actively participating in support networks. Schools introduced educational programs on child safety and digital guidance, teaching children and parents how to prevent risky situations. The disappearance that once symbolized fear now represents the strength of the union between society and justice. But perhaps the most powerful lesson came from an unexpected element: the internet. It was through social media that the truth came to light. A casual click by a woman confined to her home, scrolling through Instagram, solved a case that the police, the press eyes, and the courts had considered closed. Destiny manifested itself in the digital age, reminding us that, despite all the dangers of the virtual world, it can also be a tool for connection, justice, and discovery. The power of technology, combined with human persistence, has shown that not even time can completely bury the truth. Sofía's case proved that hope can be renewed in the most unlikely of places. A cell phone screen, a shared photograph, a simple coincidence that changes everything. Even so, the ending wasn't a fairy tale. Sofía returned, but not as the girl who disappeared. She returned as a woman marked by two distinct lives, carrying within herself the duality of having been the daughter of two families, loved by two worlds, and torn between them. Isabel and Miguel recovered their daughter, but they could never recover the lost years. Carla found relief, but also the awareness that time cannot be reversed. And Sofía Ruiz, by uniting her two names, transformed her own story into a symbol of reconstruction. The legacy of her journey isn't just in the laws that have changed or the institutions that have been reformed. It lies, above all, in the people who have learned from her story, in every father who holds their child's hand more tightly in a public place, in every family who decides to adopt with transparency, in every police officer who insists on not closing a case. Sofía has become the face of persistence and truth, reminding the world that, even after years of silence, justice can be reborn. Today, the name Sofía Ruiz represents more than a solved case. It represents the courage to face the past and the human capacity to rebuild identity amidst the rubble of loss. Her story carries a message that resonates beyond Spain's borders. The ending isn't always simple, and pain doesn't always turn into joy. But finding the truth, however painful, is the first step toward healing. And sometimes that truth doesn't emerge from the hands of justice or police files, but from the power of a watchful eye, a sister's faith, and the silent miracle of a reunion that time has not been able to erase. If this story touched you, if Sofía Ruiz's reunion with her family after 16 years of pain and uncertainty stirred the same emotion that moved an entire country, don't leave without leaving a like. It helps us continue telling real stories that show the power of hope and truth. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos featuring mysterious cases that, like this one, prove that time can hide, but it can also reveal. Here, each story is a reminder that justice and love never cease to exist, even when all seems lost. What do you think? Was Sofía's reunion the work of fate or an unbelievable coincidence? Leave your opinion in the comments and join us in this reflection. Until the next case.